Hey guys, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. This is Kimberly Scott and my handsome, I was going to say luscious lumberjack, Tim Scott. You got the checks.
You got,
yeah, I like it.
Go chop some
it's called
wood.
a buffalo check.
I'm going to go chop some wood.
Yeah.
I'll be back in a while.
On this fine,
Why don't you
hot
do this podcast
summer
by
day.
yourself?
The only wood we have in our backyard, honestly, is like bark because
You
you
call
know
me the wood chipper.
Wood chips.
The wood
Yeah,
chipper.
it's like a ground cover. We're currently in a rental, and so we have a lot of wood chips in our backyard. So it looks like you've been busy.
Yeah, well, right. Correct. You are correct, ma'am.
So, hey, last week we were covering some more of our Q&As that have come in.
Yeah, heavy.
Really good, kind of heavy questions. Today is going to be heavy as well. So put your seatbelt on if you're driving.
Yeah.
But it's a very relevant topic. And
Yeah.
it does leave us all in a really heavy space in our heart. And it feels like it's an issue that's been plaguing our society now for going on several years.
Right.
And that is the mass shootings. And there is not a person who's taking in oxygen that doesn't feel completely perplexed about what feels to be something that is becoming epidemic across our nation. For whatever reason, it feels like it's happening more in the United States than anywhere else.
It is happening more in the United States.
Okay, so there you go. And so we're gonna dive into what we feel like personally is going on, and we won't probably go too much into the legal side of things, and I'll let you jump in here.
So, it's just like we can talk about the law enforcement. We're not law enforcement professionals.
No.
We have a child that is. Our
We have a
son
couple
is
of them.
we got one son that's a police officer, but anyway, I mean,
Yeah.
that's not our thing. We aren't legislators. We don't know about legislation. We have opinions. I have some very strong held opinions about legislation and how to address this. And you got the whole issue of the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms and all of that. So, those things, that's not where we're going to talk
Right.
about.
What we're kind of doing is gathering the common denominators of what has happened in the last couple of years of
Right.
these individuals. Tim's done a lot of research on that, and to find out what are some of the things that they have in common.
So and we're just going to give a few, and there probably could be some more things that they have in common. Every single mass shooter in recent history was a person who was disconnected. In other words, they did not have deep, meaningful connection with another human being. They were isolated. Some of them were bullied as kids. Some of them were bullied as adults. But by and large, and they're mostly white, and there's a reason for that, but there's this lack of connection of these kids. Relationships are crucial for our lives.
They are. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you say isolated. Oftentimes it may not involve some bullying, but there are those that are marginalized, which come into this category as well, which is almost as painful as bullying in that you're ignored, separated from, you know, whether it's by choice or not. But even in school situations, there are those who are marginalized based on fill in the blank. It happens every day.
There's that song. It's my new favorite song, Carlisle. What's her name? Brandy Carlisle? Anyway, it's called The Joke. And it's about being put in the middle or, people that are marginalized, bullied, and for whatever reason. It's an incredible song. I wish I could remember who it was. I think it's Brandy Carlisle, but it is. I'm getting a nod from Sophie. Yes. Have you heard that song? Do you love it? Yeah, she just Googled it.
She's so
It is
fast.
so good. We're going to play it right now.
Yeah.
No, we're not. So anyway, it's just this about marginalizing people,
Right.
kind of put in the middle, kind of relegated to outside or less
it's
than.
us and them.
Yeah, and these
you're-
people all have that in common.
Yes.
What else do they have
Another
in common?
thing they have in common for sure is childhood abuse or trauma, which seems to be on the rise. It's interesting. I feel like we live in a day and age now where we are more readily able to talk openly about our childhood trauma. Our culture, is getting to the place where, especially issues around mental health and abuse and those things, we seem to be leading more with our brokenness. However, that's not necessarily recovery, just talking about it. It's one step in the right direction. So, but this is definitely a common denominator, is that there is some kind of abuse in childhood or trauma that they've been exposed to that's been unresolved.
Yeah. And for many of us, here's something to keep in mind as we go through this. Not everybody that is disconnected picks up a gun and kills people.
Right.
Not everybody that received childhood abuse picks up a gun and commits murder.
Correct.
But these things are common with people that do. What else do we have?
Well, obviously, there's access to guns. So whether they're legal or illegal, that's a common denominator also. And oftentimes it seems like recently they are legally acquired, which is interesting. And then, but that doesn't cover, we were talking about this earlier in our show, before the show started, that it feels like what doesn't get a ton of press are the compiled mass shootings that are happening every weekend in some of our largest cities, that are mass shootings just by multiple young men, mostly in that same age group that were marginalized, had childhood trauma, and access to guns, usually illegally. So it really is pervasive. It doesn't get the same footage or coverage.
Or people that don't use guns. Like people take a truck and mow over pedestrians for the sake of some religion, or just because they're crazy.
Right.
And people that use knives and machetes and so forth. A couple of other things that we see, and these are the things. Let me just kind of lack of connection. We talked about being marginalized, childhood trauma or abuse, access to guns, and the last two that we see in every single mass shooter showed antisocial behavior days and weeks before the shooting. There were signs. So that'll help you understand. When we see those signs, we need to do something. It's about families watching other families, friends, neighbors watching, and friends. But anyway, and then the last one is they're down on their luck. Every single mass shooter was down on their luck. They had lost control. They're disempowered. They don't have hope. They don't have hope. They don't have hope, and they don't have control.
Correct.
So anyway, these things are all in common.
Yeah.
So
the question is, what causes them to get to this point? And I would say, and as we've talked about this before the show, for sure, one of the greatest issues is the breakdown in the family.
Yeah.
And what we've seen happen over the last several generations, the importance of a loving father in their lives, expressing love and respect and caring for a mother in the home, so that there's a healthy dynamic there in front of young boys, to be able to give them a proper example, leading by example, obviously. And I don't think that can be overstated. That's a huge missing part, is the breakdown of the family, and the importance of a grown man showing young boys how to love with tenderness and kindness to all people. I feel like in the generation even before me, it started to be that both parents were starting to work outside of the home because of the stress financially to keep afloat. Understandable.
Yeah.
But in that absence, there has become children basically being raised by strangers, which, let's be honest, a lot of that abuse and trauma can happen in that zone, or by neglect, and raising themselves and each other. So it's kind of a mixed pot, but truthfully, boys need their daddies, and they need daddies to lead by example in that area.
Yeah. So our daughter asked us the other day, we were talking about this because it was the day of the second mass shooting in just 24 hours. And she said, well, how do we stop this? We take away the guns, is it crazy people doing this? Not every shooter was crazy.
Right.
But they did have the things we just shared. They had those in common. And, but one of the things, this breakdown of the family, and I think this is really important, that the reason this is happening now, in contrast to, say, generations past, is we have at an all-time new level, the breakdown of the family, where you have single mothers, and God love them. I think
you married one.
Yeah, I married a single mom, and so I believe that's an important thing. And you did a great job. But to be honest with you, especially our boys, needed me in their
So
life.
needed
They
you.
needed a
Yep.
dad. And I was thankful that you chose me so I could be a part of their lives. But
Babe, I stalked you.
yeah,
Hardcore.
well, yeah, you did. But the interesting thing about it is they have the opportunity to see a man love a woman,
Yes.
and have respect for a woman, even simple things of the way I treat you and talk to you, but also the way I treat them and
Right.
talk to them. There is something powerful of a connection between a father and a son. So if you're divorced,
Yeah.
try to make sure that that husband is their father has time with them. If you're in a blended family as we are, make sure that that stepfather functions as a loving father where there's that love. And anyway, boys need dads. We need men. We need relationships. I have a Bible study. We had it last night. We have it every week, and it's just guys, about 10 guys.
20-somethings, yeah.
Yeah, and we just hang out as guys. It's a little bit of a locker room.
Yep.
But we study
All
the
of us
Bible.
girls, we
Yeah.
leave the premises.
Yeah, but it's it's awesome because we study the things about God and how much we
Real
love
talk,
God, and we're
too.
growing real talk, and it's just guys together, and it's cool because we all hug each other and tell each other we love each other as we're getting ready to leave, and when we come, it's a really kind of a neat thing.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing is the breakdown of moral consequence. I think that there's been this decay in consequences for people's behavior. What has happened to discipline? What has happened? We don't need punishment. Punishment looks back and it says, you getting this for that. But discipline looks to the future, said, here's a consequence that's going to help you realize this behavior is unacceptable, unhealthy, or for whatever reason. And if you have that breakdown in discipline, you've got these kids that are isolated and they don't have dads. You got to break down of this family. Then you're going to have ready-made
Right.
for violence.
Right.
Another thing is the proliferation of pornography and violent
Right.
games.
Yes.
I'll put those together.
Oh my gosh, it's such a concern to me.
It's
Yeah.
these violent games where, and I know that there are a lot of kids that play violent games. I don't even know what they're called, but where they're shooting other guys, and you only win by shooting them so many times and so forth. And I'm just obviously not a game player, but never have been.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
What blows my mind now is, especially with some of our grandkids, is that the trend is to watch other people playing the games online on
Oh,
YouTube.
that's right. Two of
and
our
I'm
grandsons
like,
watch
so
that,
you're
yeah.
like removed from it twice
Yeah.
and just as entertained watching somebody else shoot the bad guys.
Yeah, we say, hey, Trent, Jared, why are you guys watching
Not
that?
just Trent and
'Cause
Jared.
I said, why are you watching just to
Yeah.
them? And they go, because they're better at it than us.
I know.
I'm like,
It so blows
okay.
my mind. But literally hours in a day, this generation will be,
Yeah.
unless there's healthy boundaries, which fortunately
Yeah.
our grandkids have been given like a limit of time that they're
It's-
allowed to do that. But it's still,
It's having an impact.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't think that we should overstate that, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it is something that is causing this, but it's certainly a factor. The proliferation of pornography.
Yeah.
Pornography used to be something you went and got and bought a magazine and looked at. Now,
It finds
and
you.
for years, it just, you punch in the wrong thing in Google, and
Yeah.
before you know it, you're going to have something that's lewd.
right. And to be frank, I mean, we love our Netflix and we
Yeah.
love our different shows, but
Yeah.
it's really even normal TV now. It seems to have pornographic tones now.
Yeah.
You can't find hardly
and
ever.
so what that does is you start having a different view of
Yes.
human life. You have a
Right.
lower view of human life.
Yeah.
And then the next thing, before we get on to the next one, is breakdown of spiritual connection to God. And not seeing God as sovereign, trivializing God, making God small enough to manage intellectually, emotionally. We've forgotten God is so big, he's unknowable. He is beyond our comprehension. He's incomprehensible. You can't put God into a little definition.
Finite mind.
Yeah, and pull him into he's infinite. He's
Yeah.
beyond our capacity to understand. I don't know about you, but I want a God that's so big I can't understand him.
Yeah.
And then I can trust that God to take care of things. But I think we've lost that. And what's
I
the
think
last
in that
one?
effort to kind of bring God down small enough for us to understand, what we've done is we have lowered our view of God. And in doing that, we also have lowered our view of humanity.
Right.
And so our respect and our appreciation and value for fellow humans on this planet has been lowered. Thus, the shootings, the entertainment of watching people being killed, all of the things, it's a desensitization to not just humankind, but it starts with that bringing God down to almost like our level of understanding. So we've lowered our view of people, and it seems like it's prolific. The rise of abortions. It's just like people are the talk of geriatric. What do you call it? I'm blanking out right now. Where basically opting out of life. If your parent euthanasia. Thank you. Yeah. And but I just feel like as a whole, as a society, we have lowered our value of people and of God, and that's a common.
Yeah, and if you're uncomfortable, or here's something to keep in mind: the value of a child that is severely handicapped is exactly the same value of someone who is the most brilliant person on the planet.
Absolutely.
Because our human value is based on the intrinsic value that God has given to us. We are created in the image of God.
Yes.
And as image bearer, even though we're fallen, we're sinners, we still are sacred to God. And we've lost that because I love what Francis Schaeffer, actually, I don't even know if you were born when this came out. Francis Schaeffer wrote a book, and his son, Frankie Schaeffer, did a series called Whatever Happened to the Human Race. And it was, I read the book and I saw the film series, and essentially it was this is kind of the thesis. The lower your view of God, the lower your view of humanity. What has happened to humanity in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and now has affected our generations to follow the baby boomers and the Gen X, and now with the millennial generation, there has been a lower view of humanity. So why not kill a human being? What does it matter? It's like a dog. It's like a cat.
Right.
And so it really doesn't matter. The lower your view of God, the lower your view of humanity, as Francis Schaeffer said. And so what that means is you're not going to respect that human life. And if you don't respect that human life, you can do whatever you want. Right. So if you're uncomfortable, that human life. So I'll go shoot as many people as I possibly can on my way out, because I know I hate myself. And every one of these shooters hated themselves.
Yeah.
So they had that self-loathing.
So the big question here, and what will probably bring this to a close on, is what can we do about this? And that there's so many conversations happening on television and on the radio right now about what the big fix is. And there is truthfully no magic wand that we can wave, because there's so many different reasons why we've come to where we are. But I think it really does start in the home.
Yeah.
It starts in the home, and each parent, whether you're single or married, taking responsibility to do what you can, look for the warning signs, investing in your family, taking the time, staying committed to walk that out with them. And it really does start in the family unit. Yeah. And we think it's like the government's job to do this or the school's job to do that. It really has to start in the home.
I'm all about having security guards at schools.
Yeah.
I'm all about that. I'm all about having background check. That's not going to stop it. You know what we really need is fathers and mothers to be responsible. So what a lot of our listeners don't know is that when you went through your divorce, you did everything in your power even though the odds were stacked against you, you did everything in your power to reconcile with your ex-husband. You tried to make that work, and you were being responsible. You were trying to keep that family unit together, and it didn't work. I tried for years in my marriage, and to be honest with you, I gave up too early on, and when I really tried to save the marriage, it was a little late in the game. Anyway, all of that to say that I think fathers and mothers understand how important it is for our boys to have a father and a mother, and not ones that are working all the time, but that are actually home. A little girl, a little boy needs the love of not just a mother. And I'll concede, mothers are better at loving and nurturing children than fathers. But there is something unique about a father's love. I have 4 daughters. Those 4 daughters, all of them still sit on my lap.
Yeah.
Boys all hug me and tell me they love me, and I tell them I love them. That is so important to have that. So fathers and mothers, be responsible. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I think we need to get back to the old Big Brother program. I don't know if you guys remember this.
There's something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So Big Brothers, there used to be this organization. It's probably still around. I'm just not aware of it. But we need to save the boys. And the way we're going to do that is for single mothers. Like, here you were as a single mother, and I know that Mike Meeks, his son,
Kevin McPeak.
Yeah, Kevin McPeak. Ben.
Pastor Ben Sigmund.
Yeah, Ben Sigmund.
Yeah, there was pastors in our local church that
Ryan,
took vested interest.
Yeah, they actually hung out with the boys to be a male influence. And they look up to Mike. They look up to these pastors and these.
They had skin in the game.
Yeah, and some of your friends.
Oh my
their
gosh!
husbands
And my
stood
brothers, one of my brothers, moved here to be part of their life. Yeah.
That's what we need. That kind of a program to get the boys involved with men, that godly men, because there's nothing. I think single mothers are heroes. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but there's something about a godly, loving relationship between a boy and that
a father figure, at least.
If it's not a father, at least a father figure. Yep. The second thing, we need to address bullying and say, well, how do we address that? We need to preach on it, and sometimes I want to say to the kids they're bullied, because I was bullied as a kid.
I think all of us have experienced that to some degree.
I was like, just what my dad said, kind of man up, dude.
Yeah,
You're being
rub some dirt in it.
Yeah, you're being a baby. And then my brother goes, who's the guy bullying you? Yeah. And I go, this guy. He goes, what's he doing? Is he touching you? I go, no, tell me if he touches you. This is my older brother.
Yeah.
I said, well, the next day I said, he pushed me. He goes, I want to talk to him. And he went up to him and he goes,
about to go down.
And he got physical. He beat the guy up.
Beat the crap out of him.
Yeah, it's nice to have a big brother, but not everybody has a big brother. But here, you think about somebody that's isolated and, vulnerable,
right,
and maybe a fragile emotional state. Think about this. When they're bullied, where do they go?
Right.
And so we need to have some really solid teaching about how to deal with young boys, girls too, but we're talking about shooters, and they're all men, they're all boys.
Yeah.
We need to address, not every kid that's bullied turns into a mass shooter.
No,
we're not saying that, but we need to address this well. Do you have any ideas?
I was just going to say, I feel like, throwing it at programs like, a Big Brother programs, or even putting it on the church, which we have a responsibility to teach from the pulpit.
Yeah.
Folks who are listening to us are just your average family. So what can we do? What we can do is, if you know that someone's home next door, your neighbor, you can love your neighbor by saying, okay, if she's going to be working tonight and say the teenage son is home alone, invite him to a family dinner at your house and be inclusive. So if you're a dad and you have your own kids or whatever, and you're going to go hit a ball at the park or whatever, just volunteer to include someone in on that. Like what's around you. Don't get overwhelmed with the big picture here. But if we all took a vested interest in what's close to us and who can we reach, like Andy Stanley said, do for one what you wish you could do for all.
Yeah, that's great.
Key.
Yeah. I watched Malachi. He was after school coach for YMCA.
Yeah.
And
so
he
good
had
at
these
it,
young
too.
boys, and the little girls wanted to date him. I think they were just like, he was so cute,
Yeah.
But the boys wanted to be like him.
Yeah.
And he's kind of got a cool factor.
Yeah.
Our son Malachi's a pretty cool
He's got
kid.
some swag.
But he's got some swag. But he kind of come along these kids and teach them some sports and so forth, and
Cared about 'em.
surfing. He taught
Yeah.
in the surfing camp. Those kinds of things, whether it's the YMCA or wherever it is, but those of us who have the ability to see a neighbor or a friend or have a friend who's a single mother, let's jump in. Let's do
Yes.
our part.
I agree. That sounds good. Well, there you go. We wrapped it up. Oh, we have one more thing.
Yeah.
How do we model? Oh, this is another thing that we can do, and that is model manliness, strong, non-toxic masculinity, and mature, well-balanced men.
Yeah.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah, it was.
You should have said that.
Non-toxic masculinity. I think masculinity has gotten a bad rap.
Yes.
And if you'll turn your phone off, we won't have to listen to that. Thank you. Yeah, it's hers. So everybody's going, what's going on? You don't even hear it, but we're so distracted we can't even. So anyway, there's this bad rap that masculinity has.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with masculinity. There's nothing wrong with a mature man who is well balanced, who is a man who is strong, who is manly. Toxic masculinity is this oppressive, almost a hater of women, a misogynist, somebody who hates women or just has disregard for women, doesn't have respect. I consider myself a pretty manly guy.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying
You're my
yes.
lumberjack, Tim.
Yeah,
you're my luscious lumberjack.
Today I'm the lumberjack. I'm going to go get the wood chipper going out here. Anyway, but I open your door for you.
I know, and I love that. And you've taught
yeah.
all of our boys open their doors for their lady loves, which is that's been by leadership by example,
Right. So when we take girls,
and you don't let me walk on the outside on a sidewalk, which I always thought was weird.
It's always, no, we're walking down the road. I go, babe, you got to get on the inside. So I walk on the outside.
So if a car comes, it's going to hit you instead of me, which is would be a terrible thing to watch. But
my dad always said, so you're the protector, you're bigger, so you're the protector, and so you're on the outside. And I don't know, it just makes sense to me. And
the key
it's
is
just
that,
a masculine thing to do, but that doesn't demean the woman.
No.
I opened a door for a woman the other day. She goes, I can handle it myself. I said, I'm sure you can handle the door, but I was just showing respect to you.
Yeah.
Respect to me like I'm less than you. Yeah. I'm like, okay.
Don't even get me started on that, because I want to. I
yeah.
feel like that's a separate podcast for me with the ladies, because I just want to say,
but
your greatest power comes from embracing your femininity, not from trying to emulate your masculinity or whatever.
I didn't mean to get sidetracked on that, but just kind of pull it together.
Yeah.
These boys need to know what it is to be a real man, because I'm going to tell you something straight up. These guys that do these mass shootings are cowards. That's what they are. They're cowards.
And they're broken.
They are broken. And my heart goes out to the fact that they're broken. But cowards do these kinds of acts. And so what I'm going to tell you is, if you want boys not to be cowards, they need men in their lives that will love them well, that will model masculinity, that also have tenderness toward the women in their life, and treat women with respect and treat other men with respect. So anyway, that's our thought about
our
how
2
this
cents.
will go. Yeah, that is. That's like a full quarter right there, not 2 cents.
I know, and I'm sure we'll have some interesting responses to this. But you know what? A podcast is about giving our opinions, and we want you to be able to disagree if you feel that way. That's cool. We're just throwing out our ideas here.
So we got to run. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We're Tim and Kimberly with Hope Rescue Podcast. You can catch us at hoperescuepodcast.org. Some of you already know that. Invite your friends to come. Check us out on Instagram, and also we're on Facebook. Love to have you join us, and invite your friends to do so. Thanks for listening to this podcast. God bless. Have a great week. Bye.